Hello and welcome to another episode of the Empowering Leaders podcast. At Aleda, we are passionate about inspiring connections and creating a world of collaboration. Our signature program, Aleda Connect, curates groups of 5 to 6 leaders from diverse backgrounds in sport, industry, social venture and the arts who come together to learn, to connect and to collaborate.
It's been amazing. Here you are on this Zoom call, feeling within the first session like you intimately know these people and care for them. And then all of a sudden realizing that even though you're in totally different industries, we're all going through the same thing, or we've been through it and we can help each other, or there's just this hurdle that you can't see past. And then you share it with the group and there's 5 answers in 40 minutes and you think, I have not slept for 2 weeks thinking about that. Like, how is this possible?
So you're listening to stories and the breadcrumbs of what makes success, and I constantly get something out of these Zoom calls and catch-ups because we're all living the same stuff, aren't we?
Extraordinary people with extraordinary experience. What happens there is magical.
The Empowering Leaders podcast is proudly brought to you by Victoria University, where cutting-edge sports and exercise science facilities like heat chambers, performance labs, and altitude environments mean VU is ranked 7th in the world for sports science. VU, uniquely you. As always, a big thank you to Jason Nicholas and his team at Temper Bedding, a mattress like no other. If you enjoy listening to the Empowering Leaders podcast, be sure to subscribe, and please, if you have a moment, we would love you to leave a review so we can reach more listeners and empower more leaders. Today on the Empowering Leaders podcast, we're bringing you something a little different. This is our sleep special. In a world obsessed with talent, strategy and high performance routines, sleep is still considered the most powerful performance enhancer available to every human being. The research is quite extraordinary. A single night of poor sleep can reduce your learning capacity by up to 40%. Consistently sleeping fewer than 6 hours can increase injury risk, impairs decision making and slows reaction time to a level similar to alcohol intoxication. Our guest today sits at the very top of this field. Anna West is one of the world's most sought after sleep and recovery coaches. She's advised some of the biggest sporting organisations on the planet, including Premier League clubs such as Arsenal, German national men's football team, Olympic programs, and elite performers across sport and business. Her background combines sports science, clinical nursing, and 2 decades of practical work inside high pressure environments. Anna has taken the best global research on circadian rhythms, travel fatigue, recovery, stress and human behaviour and turned it into simple and powerful strategies that can change the trajectory of athletes and teams and literally anyone wanting to get the most out of their life. She's worked one-on-one with players, shaped entire performance departments and helped build environments where sleep is treated as a competitive advantage, not just an afterthought. And this conversation might just improve your life, your leadership and your own long-term well-being. It's a genuine pleasure to welcome the founder of Sleep to Perform, Anna West. Great to see you again, Anna.
Thank you very much. That was a very, very, very nice introduction.
Well, you've had an incredible impact on so many people. Can I start, Anna, with just asking, where did the passion come for you to become one of the world's leading sleep experts?
I think the passion didn't come from wanting to be the leading expert. The passion came from understanding the impact that sleep has and one-on-one trying on my own system and body what works well when you sleep well and what absolutely doesn't work when you start to sleep poorly. I was very, very young when I had my first kid. I was studying with a baby on one arm and then I had another kid. So I did university with 2 small babies and was very, very much of an overachiever on many levels, didn't sleep. And then I really realized that was not a competitive advantage. It was the very opposite. Started to dig into sleep and didn't necessarily decide on sleep becoming my career, but by luck, by coincidence, by whatever you want to call it, it did become a very big interest of mine and also my work field. Frustratingly enough, I ended also in research. And research is nice, but if we can't translate it, it doesn't change a comma. So that became my passion. Like, how can you actually take all this really interesting data, these findings, and actually turning it into meaningful changes for people?
Anna, you know the research so well. How important is sleep to our overall health?
So sleep is 100% one of the core pillars for our overall health. People might have a tendency to neglect it because they believe that other factors are more important. But I usually say, especially in athletic environments, that there's like no domain in your system that does not benefit from a good night's sleep. At the same time, and I was smiling a bit when you made the introduction, I think it's incredibly important that we don't create fear around not sleeping well. Because there's so many things in a daily life setting that can compromise sleep. So the real key to good sleep is learning how to navigate some of these obstacles and still try your best.
And you mentioned the fear of not being able to get enough sleep. Is that a real thing that you deal with people that actually creates more anxiety, that if they don't get the 8 or 9 hours they want, that's causing more harm than potentially getting the sleep itself?
100%. And I would say more and more. There's a very nice portion of attention that has been put into sleep, especially maybe like the last 7-8 years, which is really, really good. But at the same time, some of these statistical facts, like you brought some of them up, like if I don't sleep well, I get injured. If I don't sleep well, I get ill. But we forget a little bit to translate how people can then come to the point of sleeping well. So I do meet a lot of people with an elevated level of sleep anxiety. And I also believe that some of the technologies that are available in the market, they can either like really push good habits, or they can push a lot of fear, because there's a lot of feedback that's very generically generated. Like if you wear a device, the device will know many things about you, but very often doesn't know the root cause of why you're not sleeping well. So yes, I do meet quite a lot of sleep fear in the real world, to be honest.
So where do you sit on that, Anna, with the wearables have become so popular and people are measuring their sleep? Is that got a place for you in better sleep, or you're not a fan?
It's a difficult one to give a straightforward answer to, because first of all, I always say, technology is not a solution, it's a support. No matter what you measure, the change in data comes from change behavior, not because you're wearing a device. But the device can very often create awareness. It can very often detect some habits, and it can push back some information. But as an example, the wearable device does not know if you've had a falling out with someone or if you lost someone, but it can detect the reaction. And there's a very, very big difference in the quality of data that these devices can measure. So I believe that they can do some good, but I also believe that they can do massive damage if we don't know how to use the data.
So on that, how do you balance the science of sleep with the individual habits and personalities, different lifestyles that we all lead that are so different?
I'm quite lucky, right? Because I get to work a lot one-on-one with people. I get to work in a lot of resourceful environments as well. So I have a chance and an opportunity very often to individualize the approach. That means if I was working with you, Luke, I would have to get to know who you actually are, so that I understand your circadian rhythm, your habits, your family conditions in the past, your sporting conditions. And then we merge that into a program that fits you. So I then take science and then I try to translate it with respect to who you are. Now, everyone can't be in individual programs, but there can be a lot of things done in environments as well that would respect science, but translate it into reality. You mentioned that I work in high-level football. Like nothing in football fits circadian rhythm, let's be honest, right? When we have very late kickoff times, or last night, Germany, the team I work for, was playing their very important final games to qualify for the World Cup. Kickoff time late in the evening, that completely works against natural biology. Science will say it's bad. Reality is that they have to do it. So when we do translate science, we need to take into account that we can't change these kickoff times. Or if you're a businessman that have to fly somewhere, sometimes we can't change these flight times. So the key is, how do you take that science and your reality, bridge it, and then still develop habits around it that will ultimately still give you some advantage.
And you just mentioned how personalized it is to work out your own biology and rhythms and what works for you, but are there some universal things? Are there 3 things that people listening can do that should support better sleep for them tonight?
I think there's one thing, and it's a simple thing, and that's never forget your inner caveman or cavewoman. And I repeat it always, right? So biology didn't really change. So our need from a biological perspective in our systems are still the same as if you go back millions of years, which means that the brain and the body needs natural daylight. The body needs movement. The body needs to have plenty of hydration. So if you keep some of these like very simple factors balanced in your system, you're already on the route to a better night's sleep. And I think advice number 2, besides remembering your inner caveman or cavewoman, is also to remember that a good night's sleep starts when you wake up in the morning and not just before you go to bed. And everything accumulated, everything we do during the day will result in something sleep, like an equation. And people forget that. People think that they can just like bang on, like push through the whole day, be very stressed out and still expect the body to sleep really well, which will not be the case because sleep is very dependent on hormone balance. And if we don't have a good balance in our hormones, you have a very clear result in your sleep. So yes, there are very simple things that will apply for everyone. And the most simple things are often the things that people tend to forget the most.
And you mentioned thinking about the inner caveman or cavewoman, and so getting up when the sun gets up. There was no natural light, and as the sun goes down, they're the optimal times for sleep. Is that practical now? We're surrounded by these fluorescent lights everywhere, and that stimulation. Is that something we've got to work against now to try and sleep better?
I think, look, again, being sensible. We wake up with the light, we fall asleep easier when the light disappears, right? So there are definitely some aspects in regards to light settings that can either like support sleep or hinder sleep. So we do need to be mindful. Like, let's say you're in your living room in the evening and you have spots in your ceiling and they're switched on with high intensity. That wires the brain, right? That signals the very opposite of actually relaxing. So yes, you have to be mindful about all these different light sources that are around you, but there are some pretty simple tricks, like in the evening, only switch on indirect lights, as an example. In the morning, especially, look, I'm Danish. I live in Switzerland, but I'm Danish. In Scandinavia, we have very little light basically from October until March, right? It's dark, cold, and gray. So when you are in spaces like that, you need to be even more mindful about actually getting daylight in the morning, getting outside, etc., and potentially prolong a little bit the situation around light because it disappears at 3:00 in the afternoon.
So Anna, when someone comes into your world and says, I'm a night owl, that's me at my best, and I feel better at midnight and I like sleeping in, is that possible to be just wired that way, or should we try to get up more with the sun and go to bed as the sun goes down?
The thing is, look, I can't change your genetics, if that makes sense. But you can help your genetics. So if you know you are a night owl, as an example, and you recognize that this is what you are, actually having some like tools in place so that you don't arouse your system even further in the evening, that this is not the place and time where you get the most like light exposure, as an example. This is not where you fuel the most fluids into your system or eat sugar, or that will actually make it more difficult to fall asleep. The same if you're a night owl, you probably also struggle to get up in the morning. Then it's actually quite important that you have some really firm like morning strategies that can help you get that energy up, because what happens is most likely that your blood pressure is even lower, your pulse is even lower, which makes it even more difficult to kickstart the body. So depending on your genetics, it's actually quite important to understand what am I, and then what kind of tools do I need to have in place so that I make it easier for me to live in a world that doesn't, really take into account your genetics.
And when you live in Australia and this part of the world, you get used to long haul flights and spending enormous amounts of time, and this idea of jet lag, travel fatigue, I think you call it is a passion of mine around, well, you've got to be there. You may as well try and arrive at your best and feel your best. Have you got some tips for people when they're traveling or staying in hotels? What should we be thinking about?
So the same applies theoretically, right? And it also really depends on how long are you traveling for. Like, does it really pay off to shift your rhythm if you only go for 2 days, as an example? Or look, the thing is, very, very simple tricks can make very, very meaningful and big differences when it comes to jet lag mitigation. The biggest trick is also not to stress about it, right? The more we stress about the time zone shift, the more we also create stress hormones, and they work against your natural production of melatonin, right? So if we stress about jet lag and we are almost expecting that we will feel like crap when we arrive, that is also the feeling that we will feel. Hydration is a massive factor when it comes to jet lag mitigation. And people really, really hydrate too little. And they forget that there's a pressure in the cabin, in the flight as well, which dehydrates even further. So hydration is a massive thing that I push with my clients and athletes. Another one would be movement on the plane, which people tend to forget as well, especially when they travel comfortably, right? They can have legs up, etc. And that's nice, but we still need to move the body. And then hydration coupled with also nutrition. So depending on how long you're flying, where you're flying to, sometimes it's actually a lot better to eat at the airport rather than eat on the flight, depending on the flight times. Jet lag mitigation needs to be very individualized depending on where you're traveling from, where you're traveling to, how many hours are you on the flight. But there are some really good apps out there that can at least guide you a little bit. One is called Time Shift, as an example. It's very simple, and for athletes maybe not super optimal, but it can give you some good indicators about when to expose yourself to light, when to cut off caffeine depending on your arrival destination, etc. And then couple it with daylight upon arrival, movement, etc.
I love it. Great advice. I subscribe to all of that. We read recently LeBron James at 41 years of age, next month, still playing in the NBA at the highest level, arguably one of the greatest athletes of all time. And he shared that he sleeps 12 hours a night, or that's what he aims for, and then still naps during the day, spends several $1 million on his sleep and recovery routine. Are you seeing that in some of the elite performers around the world, that they are investing heavily?
Yeah, I do. And I also do understand, right, that there's a big aspect of longevity in good sleep, and athletes have very short career spans compared to the normal population. When we sleep, as an example, that's where we create testosterone. When we sleep poorly, we reduce our production of testosterone. When that's reduced, we age quicker, right? So I do understand why athletes in particular look at this topic as a weapon in a weird and wonderful way, and why they invest a lot of money in it. What I still have to say that, like, nothing beats basics, right? And that's a very important message, even for high level athletes. They can buy the most expensive bed or the most expensive recovery modalities, but if they still avoid getting daylight or don't hydrate well, or they don't see that they have to couple all of these things, the return on investment isn't going to be as high. Especially, let's say they buy a really expensive mattress, but they can't shut down the brain when they hit the pillow, as an example, because they have too much stress left in their system. They will probably sleep okay, but they won't optimize their potential. So good sleep and creating these longevity sleep strategies, they need to be seen as circadian rhythm strategies rather than sleep strategies.
And you're going through there and the basics of sleep. Can you just outline what they are that don't need a budget like LeBron James to be able to achieve? What sort of things should we be doing?
So again, I mentioned before small things like get up in the morning, make sure you get outside. Also quite important is actually to couple it with nutrition, so that you make sure that you have relatively level blood sugar levels throughout the day, so you don't spike massively on blood sugar or drop down. Because when that happens, what happens is also that your body starts to produce even more stress hormones. And you have to imagine that when you wake up in the morning, we actually like that our stress hormones are relatively high because that's what gets our system going. And then we want that stress to decline throughout the day. And we do that by applying like sensible, clever breaks throughout the day. That's also why someone like LeBron James is like quite powerful in his messaging around napping. Many people, they can't nap. They don't have time for a nap, or they will always argue that they don't have time for a nap. But small breaks in the day and also mental breaks will actually lower these level of stress hormones. When we manage to do that, coupled with good nutrition and movement, we also then support the natural production of melatonin, which is our sleep hormone. There are so many things that we can do that do the very opposite, right? Hinder our natural production. And then we start to like question, like, why do I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning? And it's simply because you go to bed with too much stress in your system, so the body doesn't produce sufficient sleep hormone to keep you sleeping throughout the night. So it's a very good trick question as well. If people, they wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, and they don't know why, then I usually start to target, like, what does your day look like? Not what do you do before you go to bed, but what does your day look like? And how many times in the day do you actually support your stress levels to come down? And very often people are like, oh, I didn't even like think about that. So breaks in the day are longevity because it fosters good sleep. And in especially like the athletic field, breaks are not necessarily seen as like powerful, but having breaks, having a power nap, having a mental break, doing mindful exercises, they're incredibly powerful because it fosters better recovery during the night.
We all are born different. As we grow, the experiences we have develop into outlooks uniquely our own, charting our life's course. No one sees an idea, opinion, or opportunity like you. And no one sees you like VU. Victoria University. Uniquely you.
At Aleda, our signature program, Aleda Connect, is something we're really passionate and proud of. We bring together groups of 5 to 6 people around the globe from diverse backgrounds, sport, industry, social venture and the arts. We come together to learn, to connect and to collaborate.
The thing that I've loved about it is not just the meetings that we have with our group, it's the thinking that you do for days and days afterwards. Someone says something and it sparks a thought, and I found that I would go back and look at things that I was doing in a different light. Within my sport and within women's sport, I'm just someone who I try to lead by keeping people talking about the issues. There's times when I think the person I'm trying to convince is not listening to me. It actually got me thinking about, okay, this is how I need to address my communication with them. So it was so valuable, and the little group that we've got is great, and I'm really looking forward to sort of continuing to connect with them into the future because we're all so very different. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed it.
There's some trends going on, Anna, around mouth tape at night to improve nasal breathing. Where do you sit on that one?
You know what? I never judge, right? But I'm scientific to the bone, and as long as we don't have proof of evidence enough to claim that it's something that works for everyone, and we actually with mouth taping see the very opposite, that it can be quite detrimental for good sleep. If you don't know if you have any underlying mechanisms, I would never recommend it, to be honest. There's a big trend around it, and trust me, I've had my share of athletes come to me because when very powerful, let's call it profiles in the sporting world really go out and promote it, it becomes very sexy, it becomes very interesting. So rather than saying whether or not like mouth taping works or not, I think I want to encourage people to apply critical thinking around all the trends that they see out there, not just mouth taping. Yes, it's good to shut your mouth because when we breathe through the nose, oxygen goes quicker to the brain. But I don't know if you've tried mouth taping. But very often what happens is that if I measure sleep on people who are mouth taping, because it's quite uncomfortable as well, what they don't see is that they will have a lot of micro awakening. So even though they believe from a placebo effect that they're sleeping better, I can actually see that they fragment their sleep even more. And fragmenting sleep for an athlete, going back to your wonderful statistics in the beginning, means that they will spend potentially less time in their deep sleep. They will then produce less testosterone. And what they also do is that they store less glycogen in their muscles. So they're looking for an effect, and they're actually potentially doing the very opposite because they're waking up many more times. And there's not enough evidence at all to support that mouth taping is good for everyone.
I'm going to admit I've tried it the last 2 nights, actually, Anna, and I
and you liked it.
Well, I love the feeling of waking up feeling like you breathe through your nose. So that felt good. The tape wasn't on when I woke up, so I think I must be in my sleep pulling it off because it is a bit weird and a bit uncomfortable. But it's my 20-year-old sons who are athletes who are saying, "Dad, you need to try this." So I've been looking forward to asking that. I mean, the idea of breathing through your nose, is there some merit in that? But you're saying perhaps be a little bit cautious about taping.
Look, there are quite a lot of nice studies that show the effect of nasal breathing during exercise, right? But there are quite few studies that actually show any effect on sleep. And if any, they actually show the very opposite, especially if you have underlying conditions like sleep apnea. Taping our mouth can actually have quite a negative effect on our system. So I would be very wrong if I was sitting here promoting a structure where we actually don't see, or actually the very opposite, see that it can have negative effects. Will it kill you tomorrow by trying? Again, absolutely, probably not. But I have to stay professional as well. I'll give you an example. So I had an athlete, and he was very keen on trying it. And I blinded his data because I was like, okay, let's try. So basically just asked him to do it, knowing that he didn't have any underlying conditions that could cause him any harm. I asked him and then subjectively compared it to his data, and he felt great. And then I showed him his data in a week where he was mouth taping versus a week where he wasn't. And physiologically, it had the very opposite effect. So there can be a mental effect that you feel great. But if you then do it over time with the cost on your physiology, the price of doing that doesn't come maybe week 1, but over time. So it's not a straightforward one, and definitely not something that I can recommend.
Fair point. And for people listening, you mentioned your own story. You're at university with 2 young kids, and this idea, just push through and you don't need to sleep. What's the advice that you'd give to people who are just pushing the envelope so hard, what they need to learn about rest and recovery to have a sustained, successful, happy life?
Look, it's a difficult one because it's almost like speaking to a, 20-year-old and then talking about investment funds, right? So when are you like planning on retiring? Ask any 20-year-old and they'll be like, huh? The thing about poor sleep is that you have some immediate effects and then you have some risky long-term effects around it. I never talk too much about like the downside of sleep. I try to do the very opposite. Like, so what do you actually get out of sleeping better? And especially in the athletic field, I try to focus a lot less on the actual sleep and then look at the performance, like enhancing effect that it can have. So we know that people start to sprint better. They start to make a lot better decisions. They minimize the risk of injury. They have a lot more like creative power in their brain, et cetera, et cetera. So the same applies for everyone else. If we want to motivate people to sleep better, they need to understand what do I get out of it, right? Rather than if they think that pushing through gives them more. And look, the classic would be a very top-down controlled environment where it can be seen as laziness if you prioritize, breaks and sleep, etc. And there you need to work around the whole culture around how sleep is perceived. I've worked in some pretty heavy corporate environments as well, where you're a little bit of a warrior. If you come into the office and you claim that I slept 1 hour last night and I can still push through, the thing people need to understand is like they can absolutely do that for a period of time, but then they will drive themselves off a cliff, right? And they're not maximizing their potential. And because I'm working in athletic environments as well, or marginal gain, they matter. The cost of not doing is so much higher than the win of actually sleeping better. So it's also how you frame it, to be honest.
On that note, and have you seen organisations that really make sleep a powerful part of their identity and their culture? Have you seen significant gains when organisations really embed that into their world?
Definitely. The thing is, there's a major difference between organizations that deal with normal people versus, let's say, athletic organizations where your people are a defined asset, right? So in athleticism, it sounds absolutely awful when I put it like this, but we know that athletes are athletes 24/7. When you work in corporate environments, there's a quite big wall between what they do in the work scenario and what they do in their private sphere, and how much that the company, as an example, can interfere with what they do in their homes. Look, statistically, we know that when people start to sleep better, we see a decline in days of being ill. We see a higher productivity. There are studies showing that you start to earn more when you sleep better, et cetera, et cetera. I've definitely seen organizations that has taken big steps towards better sleep because they have integrated like cultural guidelines. Like, we don't send emails out after 10 o'clock, as an example. We foster a culture where it's perfectly okay to go outside if you need a walk. We put information into the day stream of how you walk, so that when you go to the coffee machine at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you get information around what caffeine does to your sleep, etc. So there are many places where you as an organization can help people to better sleep. There's just a major difference between athleticism and athletic organizations versus corporate organizations, and how you can interfere with the structures.
And I was lucky enough to see you in person in London, and it's interesting when you are the sleep guru. I watch people, and I think I might have even done it myself. People come up and report on their sleep patterns to you. Is that something that occurs regularly for you? That's almost like a confession, or I'm having a drink now late at night, and I'm going to be better tomorrow night. Does that happen regularly?
Yeah, it happens quite often. I mean, you saw it in London. People come up and either they want to confess or they see me, and I don't know if I put some level of guilt into people. We were laughing, you and I, because we were standing upstairs afterwards, and I just spoken about alcohol, and then people were having drinks, and they're like, "Oh shit, Anna's in the room," and I'm like, I'm very human, right? I'm also quite social by nature. I usually say, look, people need to have the information so that they can make informed choices. If they don't know that alcohol messes up their sleep, they don't have a choice. If they then decide to have a drink, then it's an active choice, and then they also know that it can have an outcome. Yes, I do get a lot of confessions. The thing is, very often when I, let's say, do a keynote somewhere, people tend to slide up to me afterwards, and they want to kind of like discuss their own private like sleep situation. And in some environments, it's like bang on, very open. In some environments, it's almost like confessing to something that you don't want to like, in a way, admit that that's not working out very well for you. And that goes back to how environment should make it like very open. Look, a lot of companies today, or even if you take athletic organizations, we put a lot of power and emphasis into good nutrition, right? We don't preach nutrition and then serve McDonald's in the canteen, as an example, right? That wouldn't really work out, or that wouldn't play out very well. The same goes like at least that's my very philosophy. Like, we can't preach good sleep and then not support it in our structures. So if we start to preach sleep, we should also support it in the structures that we offer around people.
And it's still remarkable to think that a third of our life is spent asleep, and evolution hasn't changed that for thousands of years. We still need that sleep. And I'm obsessed with the bed that I sleep in. You get so used to it, and declaration temper bedding have been a great supporter of the podcast. Is that still play a role in having a quality bed to sleep in, Anna, or how does that sit on the list for you?
Look, I am a firm believer in having a good bed. I'm a firm believer, especially also because evolution didn't change our biology, but everything around us, like the structures around us, changed. As an example, in Germany, statistics would tell you that 37% of people, they have fragmented sleep because they sleep in too warm houses. Because in Germany, you build like architecturally very energy efficient houses, which means they're quite warm because they contaminate the heat, right? That actually requires that we think a little bit different around our mattress, because we need them to be supporting our thermoregulation, like how we heat up and how we basically get rid of heat during the night. So I'm a firm believer in a good mattress in the sense of the material that you actually lay on, but also the size and the length of the bed. Like there's a big, like I'm not very tall, right? But you're a lot taller than me. And the biggest like rookie mattress mistake that I always see is that we just buy standard length mattresses, and then people have like their feet sticking out at the end of the bed. And because they don't really know that it's bad, they start to toss and turn more at night. For an athlete, having that foot drop at night can actually lead to a higher risk or an increased risk of injury, hamstring, etc. So there's a big, powerful motivation between having a good mattress, sleeping better, and then reducing some of the risk factors around sleep. At the same time, as I stated earlier on, it's important that we can actually figure out how to shut down our system on that mattress. So it needs to be not a standalone thing. It needs to be a good mattress coupled with good habits.
And I think the key thing that I took from your presentation in London for me has been having a cold room and cooler room. And that's a game changer. If it's too hot, I'm in trouble. I sleep beautifully, but unless it's hot, is that universal, that at night time we don't want to overheat the room, that we need to get it cooler? Yes,
it's universal, and it's a universal, I wouldn't call it a mistake, because it's not a mistake when people don't know, right? But it's a universal opportunity. That's the better way to frame it, that too many people sleep in too warm rooms. It's such a simple thing today to get the temperatures down. Most places, I mean, if you don't have an aircon system, at least like try to have a fan and air your room, if that makes sense. Another trick, and I think I said that to you as well, is like take a warm shower before you go to bed, because that forces the body to start to heat up so that the temperature inside your body actually drops down. And that makes it a lot easier to fall asleep and stay asleep as well. So there are tricks that you can do around the bed.
So it's funny, is that we've always thought the opposite, and I cold shower at night, but I still can't bring myself to get that hot, even though I know what you're saying, is that your body then tries to cool itself down.
Have you tried it?
I haven't tried it. So it's the sleep confessions. You get them out of people.
I know.
Very quickly. If there was one tip for everyone listening who wants to sleep better, is there something that you would leave everyone with that they should take home with them?
I mean, you mentioned it yourself in regards to temperature. And again, you asked me in the beginning when we were speaking, I think tip number one is never forget the inner caveman or woman. And do remember that caveman or woman didn't have a fridge, a water tap, etc. So when they got up in the morning, they had to activate the system before they fueled it. So a good tip as an example is also, like, I'm sitting here with a coffee cup because it's early morning here still, but I don't start my day like on an empty stomach, just fueling caffeine into my system. So the tip is to understand that a good night's sleep is a result of everything that we do during the day.
And it's an important conversation. It's so many opportunities for us to sleep better and what it does for health. And I could listen to your expertise for many hours. Anna's the founder and CEO of High Performance Consultancy, Sleep to Perform. She looks after some of the world's best athletes and high performers, and a world-leading expert in this space. And it's always great to see you. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for listening in.